Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 14th episode of the Oreninc podcast. I'm joined again today by Paul Harris and Mickey Fulp, the Mercenary Geologist. And as always, I'd like to thank them for their time. Hi, gents.
Hello.
Hi there, Kai. Hi, Mickey.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Kai.
As always, we've prepared just a little agenda. So we got some interesting topics prepared and some news from the U.S. side of things that I haven't personally heard about. And I think they are great news for the whole market with projects or companies with projects in the U.S. We're going to talk about that with Mickey here in a second. And with Paul, we're going to take a look at the lithium market here. He's made an interesting, I wouldn't call it a discovery, but he noticed some interesting developments there over the last few days here. We're going to talk about that in a second as well. I'm going to start us off, as always, talking about the Oreninc Index and what we've seen here over the last 2 weeks in the markets. It seems like we're still in a very slow financing market, or we have been in the last couple of weeks. Our index score is down to 28 points, which is really summer levels, down from 31 points, which is also a very low score. We've only seen a total number of financings, or a total dollar amount of financing of $37 million, which was a 2-week high still, but it's still a low number. And only 23 financings have been announced in the last week, and that's data up to Thursday last week. So we've announced that on Monday this week. What we have noticed, and what Paul and Mickey and I have discussed prior to pressing the record button here, is that we've seen a flurry of financings now coming to market. Two of them, for example, Integra Resources, a $25 million financing, and Allegiant Gold in Nevada, another $12 million financing. Just those two financings alone already make up the total dollar amount of last week. So what we've suspected after the Precious Metals Summit, that we should see a very busy fall here in terms of financings, might be starting to happen just now. Would you agree, gentlemen? Is this the start of a busy fall?
Well, we would hope so. You're the man to assess that, I think, Kai.
No, the data definitely supports that. And one observation we all made here is that the projects are all in the U.S. that are getting a lot of attention right now. Integra in Idaho and Allegiant in Nevada. And Mickey, you made an interesting comment there before we started recording that the U.S. Or the president signed an executive order in terms of the sage grouse.
Well, there's been a couple of executive orders that have been very important over the last, say, 6 weeks or so. The first was an order that Trump signed, if memory serves, in mid-August, that any environmental impact statement on any project in the U.S., now, and this goes way beyond mining, had to be completed start to finish in a year or less. And the second part of that order was they could not be more than 150 pages long, except under extenuating circumstances, and they could be 300 pages. So this was the regulations that the Department of Interior came out with in early September based on Trump's executive order. The second order came out last week, and it was a rollback of all sage grouse habitat in the Pacific, in the northwest U.S., essentially east of the mountains. So any place that was declared sagebrush or sage grouse habitat had been withdrawn by executive order by the Obama administration in the last couple of weeks of his tenure. And that would have removed 10 million acres from mineral entry. That was rolled back and is gone and cannot be appealed. So I think that has led the Trump administration's executive orders have led to increased interest in gold deposits in the United States. Another one that was completed recently, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, would be Revival Gold at the Bear Track deposit in central Idaho. So that was another $11 million financing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's part of a general trend whereby companies, miners are taking looking again, a good strong look again at the US as a viable jurisdiction, given all of the hassles they're perceiving in other jurisdictions, such as Latin America, where communities and environment concern getting more. The ability to work in the US is seen as a real benefit compared to other jurisdictions. In April, when I was speaking with the head of Freeport-McMoRan, Richard Atkinson, he said, they're looking at their next big development being in Arizona because there's infrastructure, there's power, there's roads, there's skilled labor, there's no unions. People drive their own vehicles to work. People sleep in their own beds. People eat their own food. The company just gets to work. So it becomes developing mines in the United States seems to be becoming a much better overall proposition for companies than taking the risks of going into a developing world country.
Yeah, no, Make America Great Again seems to be the underlying thesis here, right?
Good point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, no, to wrap this up, I think this is a very interesting development here, and I'm quite keen. I always like projects in Nevada, Arizona. I was always cautious about, for example, because of the environmental and the air quality permits, and if that's changing as well now. Not the permitting itself, but the timeline of the permitting. It's becoming more and more interesting.
Yep.
Isn't the sort of Clean Air Act being rolled back as well?
Yes.
So for the benefit of the coal industry.
Right. It's the Clean Power Act, which the Clean Air Act was actually passed in 1971 or 72, but it's the Clean Power Act, which was very onerous to the nuclear and coal industries, and that's been scrapped now.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting. No, I'm quite excited. I think in 10 years from now, we'll be looking back, and it'd be very interesting to have another conversation in 10 years' time about the permitting timelines and how they've changed in recent months. So I think that'd be very interesting to see. But on to our next topic here. We wanted to briefly discuss the development of base metal prices and copper, especially. I think, Nikki, you wanted to talk about going over $3 again.
Yeah, well, I'll preface my remarks by saying base metals are surging. And it's not only copper, but even more so zinc and lead, both in backwardation right now, which means they're in such short supply for the immediate term that it's the forward curves do not exist. They both hit 10-year highs last week, zinc at 152 and lead at 118. So 10 years highs, that takes us back to the exponential growth in base metal prices pre-global economic crisis. And also copper, now at 310. On September 12th, after it had fallen back from a high of 312 back in, and actually got as low as 289, I went on BNN and said, I don't see how copper can stay below $3 very long. And, I'm tooting my own horn a bit here, but I saw a consolidation phase coming, and it looks like that consolidation phase in the low 290s is now complete. 3 weeks later, it is now above $3 once again, and today it closed at 310, basically on Chinese buying after being a week-long holiday, low inventories, very strong future curve, contango with about a penny per month going 6 months out. And also I think part of it's the risk that we see in Indonesia with Grasberg, which is the world's second largest copper mine, their problems with resource nationalism and the threat of expropriation by the Indonesians.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know the Chinese were on a week-long holiday. Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, they were.
Colombia, but
Chinese
the other week.
markets were closed all last week.
So base metal prices definitely something to watch out for, and I think that's quite interesting. And lots of interest also in the companies here. We're tracking that here as well, so we'll see how that's going forward in the next couple of months and how activity is going to pick up there as well. Paul, you made an interesting observation in the lithium space over the last week here, actually. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure, yes. Well, I guess since the precious metals conferences have run their course in September, there's been a flurry, an influx of press releases from Lithium Juniors. I mean, I would say there's easily been 20 or a couple of dozen in the past couple of weeks. Many financings going on, Lithium X, Wealth Minerals and others financing at the moment. But perhaps the ones that caught my eye most are the Nemaska getting closer to their production goal. Test work is continues to be positive. They're now making lithium hydroxide or from lithium sulfate. Lithium sulfate's their intermediary. That's all going very well. And also Pure Energy just signed a technology development agreement with Tenova and Solvay and Suez. So they've got 3 big industrial partners to help them work out the technological solution to produce from their Clayton Valley brines in Nevada. So there's a lot of noise out there in the lithium space, but there does seem to be a few sort of more notable things going on as well.
No, that's a very interesting space, and I know the battery metal space in general is picking up here. I'm following cobalt, for example, as well, and Lithium X, the $13 million bought deal financing, has been announced on the 11th here, so it's going to be in the new index numbers. I think the index this week is really going to pop, and I think we're just at the beginning of a really, I wouldn't call it a fall rally yet, but let's call it fall financing activity rally maybe.
Well, yeah, we're in the fourth quarter now, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, no, fourth quarter is going to be really busy. I'm assuming till like December 10th before people start closing their books again. But I had an interesting conversation over lunch here in Vancouver yesterday with somebody, and he commented that the Canadian institutions are not at the table yet. They're still on the sidelines because they've been burned in a couple bought deals, for example, the Hut Bay financing, and they're still on the sidelines there. Have you observed that? Is that something you would underwrite or sign?
Personally, I've not looked at that, but Canadian institutions are not something that are generally on my radar screen. And I presume you mean the pension funds at all, education funds, pension funds.
Yeah, no, or also the Canadian banks as well, right? So all the bigger financings, they're which one was I was looking at one in particular the other day, and it was more U.S.-focused institutions, although Canadian banks were involved, but it was more U.S. money that was going into those placements. So so RBC, CIBC, or the big ones were not involved in those financings.
Okay.
So, okay. I think we've already hit our time limit here again. We're at 13 minutes, 14 minutes now. I think this has been a really informative podcast this week. And I want to thank you again, Mickey and Paul, as always, for taking the time. We're all looking forward to, I think, a really busy fourth quarter here in the next few weeks. And thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks a lot, gents.
Thank you very much.